To begin, we're going to have a panel, as I said, on the impact of the shale boom on the Texas economy, and I am so pleased to be joined by a distinguished panel. Gentlemen, come join. On my immediate left is Jerry Morales, who's been mayor of Midland, Texas since January of this year. We can all sit. Great. Previously, he served more than 5 years as an at-large member of Midland's City Council. He's the owner and operator of Gerardo's Casita and Gerardo's Bistro restaurants in Midland. On his left, you know Ivy Taylor, the mayor of San Antonio, familiar to people in this town and on this campus. Appointed to that job by her fellow city council members in July of this year to fill the unexpired term of Julian Castro, now Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. She previously served as District 2's representative on the council for 5 years. And I feel compelled to mention, as President Romo did, that she is a lecturer in UTSA's Public Administration Department. Thomas Tunstall has been director of the Center for Community and Business Research at UTSA's Institute for Economic Development for nearly 3 years, leading a team of economists and researchers who produce economic impact analyses and assessments and feasibility studies on a wide range of topics. And finally, Don Tymrak, city manager and former mayor of Karnes City and a former chairman of the Alamo Area Councils of Government. He has 23 years of municipal government experience and spent many years in management at the old Southwestern Bell. Can you please give our panelists a hand? Now, Dr. Tunstall, the comparison to Steve Murdoch is an enormous burden that you have to bear, and so I'm going to force you to own that and to reward my faith in you first, and ask you to set the table briefly for this conversation. Since you have presided over so many studies of the economic impact of not just the Eagle Ford Shale, but the Karnes Shale, you've actually taken a look at the entire state and the impact of these booms on the economy of the state. Would you lay out for us in brief some statistics, some data that tells us, our sense that the economy has been so vastly improved by this activity? Back that up with some data, please.
Sure. And first and foremost, especially for South Texas, I have to say that all of this economic impact was unexpected. I don't think anybody could have foreseen this. In fact, I like to joke that if I'd been running around South Texas 5 years ago and said, get ready for the shale boom, it's coming, there's an oil and gas boom coming,
right.
Get ready, people would have laughed. But our most recent economic numbers indicate that last year in 2013, the economic impact was $87 billion, supporting a little over 150,000 full-time jobs. And by 2023, we expect the economic impact to be about $137 million, supporting just under 200,000.
And those numbers have gone up in the time that you've been studying the impact of the shale. You had made predictions of what the numbers would be soon and in the out years, and you've had to revise those upward, right,
That's
as
correct.
Activity has progressed.
Right, and that's happened for a couple of reasons. One, there are constant announcements of new projects coming in,
right.
Particularly downstream related or midstream pipeline, for example, or
right.
port related activities, manufacturing activities. And then the other piece of it is just that the Eagle Ford Shale continues to surprise us to the upside. The production continues to go up.
Right.
It's estimated to be producing over 1.5 million barrels of oil and condensate daily now.
Yeah.
In fact, one forecast that we sort of put together, kind of off the books, if you will, suggests that by 2020, the production could be as high as 2.6 million barrels a day of oil and condensate. So we'll see how that goes. And the
right.
prediction is, it's a treacherous business, but certainly the prospects are bright.
Up the road in Austin, as people are getting ready to gather for another legislative session, best free entertainment going in Texas always. You hear a lot about how the state budget is going to be in really terrific shape compared to previous sessions, and that the oil and gas economy, and specifically this shale activity, is going to be the driver of that. And that's anecdotal. I think that's people's sense, but you can actually say
sure,
with some certainty that's the case.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
Our assumptions for what's going to be in the rainy day fund, more formally known as the Economic Stabilization Fund,
yep.
If there's a highway bill up on the ballot, the assumption is that it will pass, and if it does, it's going to pull some money out of the exchange, the rainy day fund. But even if it does pass, we expect by the start of the next ledge session for there to be about $7 billion in the rainy day fund, and most of that comes from the oil and gas severance taxes from South and West Texas. Yes, the state coffers should be pretty flush this next session.
Very well. Madam Mayor, we're in your city, and so in deference to that and to you, I'm going to ask you first to talk a bit about that from this issue from your perspective. Now, reflected on the stage are three people who lead communities experiencing, in some ways, the shale boom in a kind of uniformly positive way, but there are also differences. So in your case, I know in particular, the jobs picture in San Antonio has really been improved by this, but flesh this out for us from your perspective, how this has impacted San Antonio's economy.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here with you today. Can you all hear me? Am I on? I'll just try to use my outdoor voice.
Good.
Well, we're still kind of sorting through all of the various impacts, and I hear from different segments of the community the manner in which all this great economic activity is affecting both in a positive and a negative way.
Right.
Just anecdotally, we hear about people that have great job opportunities that weren't available to them before, where they can make a lot of money. But then from other sectors, I hear stuff like, well, I can't keep a bus driver because, he's going to be able to get a much better job in the Eagle Ford.
Right.
And so then that impacts other folks that are providing valuable services, and then we're trying to figure out how to backfill positions, either driving trucks or buses or construction, things that folks would be doing in town that are now doing other things. So those are some of the balances that we're trying to deal with.
Right.
Certainly, we mainly see the upswing, but we're trying to figure out how we can sort through all of it so that we can ensure that there's a sustainable, positive impact, that it's not just a blip and then.
Right. I'm going to ask you just to be sure that your mic is on while I ask you this sort of long, drawn-out question. The fact is, Mayor, we assume that the consequences of all this job creation are uniformly positive. But as you point out, what I think people don't understand is that those people are coming from some place, and often they're coming from other industries or other areas of the economy, and those areas are actually suffering possibly as a result of the success of the oil and gas business. That's what you're discovering. You mentioned the bus driver example, but that's only one example.
Yes, that's just one example.
Right, yeah. Mayor Morales, can you talk a bit about that? I read last week that the city of Midland now has the third lowest unemployment rate in the entire country.
Yeah, and of course, this is not new news for us. It has been ongoing, easily on and off for 5 years, and more importantly, the last 3 years. But we've had tremendous unemployment, and it's been challenging. It's challenging for all industries in Midland. 2.8 was the recent, I guess I just lost mine. 2.8 was the most recent ranking that came out, putting us the lowest. So it begins to, one, you're saying, yes, it's great for the economy. We have workers. We hit the 100,000 threshold.
Right.
At the same time, just as the mayor alluded to, your industries begin to talk about we can't keep up with these high wages, the overtime. Where are we going to find more workers, more qualified workers? The industries that are there now, the oil and gas in particular, they're home base. They're building home bases there. And so they're like, we've got to find more qualified workers to keep up with this drilling. Restaurants, in particular, the industry that I'm in, we're definitely seeing a huge challenge in that area. 2 years ago, we saw restaurants that were half open. You see signs just down the road with tents, hiring on the spot, starting at $14, $15. Signing bonuses at $500 or $600. McDonald's.
I'm sorry, let me stop you.
Yes.
Signing bonuses.
Signing bonuses. In Midland, Texas,
We're not talking about minor league baseball here. We're talking about...
No. To recruit employees, and here's the deal is they're stealing, of course. They're stealing from other jobs,
right.
And it's constantly going on. And so they entice them with the signing bonuses. They entice them with flexible schedules. They entice them by saying, we have vans that will pick you up and take you to work and get your children to school. There's bonuses in place to talk about your education. If you stay on 1 year, we will pay for your first 6 months of school. You've got to get very creative out there in West Texas.
Amazing. Come back to some of that in a second. Mr. Tymrak, you actually were mayor of Karnes City back in the late 80s. You left long ago office in Karnes City and came back as city manager precisely because of the economic impact to your city. You were concerned about, you saw the positives, but you were concerned also about the potential negatives.
Not exactly. I would like to think that my city council recognized.
Okay, well,
I should step down. I think it was a trick that, well, we can't get him at the ballot box, we'll get him on payroll and then send him on the highway.
all right.
But, no, it was one of these that, we knew there was gonna be a serious learning curve because we've never experienced anything like it in Eagle Ford. And Tom is right. It fell out of the sky. And it came very hard and fast. It doesn't wait on anybody, and he will get run over. For me to recognize that we are about to have our world completely changed is a very hard mindset to change in our people, because they want to hold on to what they've held on for the last 50, 75 years. But Eagle Ford changes you. You cannot avoid that. It's just going to happen.
Explain what that means. Explain what that means exactly.
Is for poor Miss Wilson, who is used to just sort of scooting through the stop signs.
Right.
You step out now beyond that stop sign, there is a whole fleet of white pickup trucks just waiting to target you. 18-wheelers to begin with. I mean, we've established a new truck route to keep
Right.
that away from us. But it was going to your favorite restaurant or place to shop. You just pull up to the front door, walk in, and get busy, whether it's just pick your table. Now it's you drive around looking for a place to park.
So there's no parking in Karnes City.
No, and that's kind of and what I've talked about before is really it all comes down to in Eagle Ford. We just trade one problem for another. The example meaning my citizens were saying we're having a dying downtown. We want to revitalize it. Revitalize downtown. So we had an old closed restaurant reopen. And so on Tuesday, I leave work after 5 o'clock in case my boss is watching. It was after 5.
Right.
Yeah. And I see 40-plus cars downtown Main Street that I haven't seen in the last 20 years. And within 24 hours of that event, my phone is ringing. Now we have a parking problem. So everything that happens in Eagle Ford just results in trading for another problem.
Ultimately, it reverberates back in some other way. I asked you this last night. I don't think we have the exact numbers on this nailed down, but you have heard, and I have heard these numbers quoted. You have roughly 3,600 residents in Karnes City?
A little less.
Little less than that. The word on the street, as it were, is that 1/3 of those residents are now millionaires with an average net worth of $6 million, and that you all are creating millionaires, something on the average of 90 for every 6 months. This is somewhat what you've heard as well.
You're doing to me what my friend Tom Tunstall did to me at the first Eagle Ford Consortium when his first study came out.
Right.
And he was going to break the news that this was going to last much longer than anybody would have imagined. And he picked one city in all of the cities he could have chosen to say that their sales tax had tripled. Well, all that did was serve to convince the comptroller's office that we were flush with cash.
And therefore, they should be collecting more money from you. Isn't that how that goes?
And it
Right.
really isn't the case. There is a lot of money coming in, but a lot of money goes out.
Right.
And yes, there was a lot of mailbox millionaires established.
Right. I want to come back to how that's changed the community of Karnes City in a second, but let me go back to Mayor Taylor. Mayor, you're still the 7th largest city, or we're going to have a, good, keep them coming. Leave the bottle, that's what it is. San Antonio was the 7th largest city by population in the country,
Yes.
correct? And growing quickly.
Yes.
But not I'm assuming that it is the case that the entire city is not benefiting from the byproduct of this shale activity, right?
Oh, well, yeah, of course, the entire city is not benefiting. I mean, it's having a great positive economic impact, but only a certain number of people are actually participating in the jobs that are available. Many of the folks that we would like to have access those ladders of opportunity aren't connected to understand.
And why is that?
Well, I think it's similar to what you see in many major American cities, that
Yeah.
people who are live in poor neighborhoods and have, limited options related to transportation and social networks, business networks. They just may not be aware of some of the opportunities that are available. So I think it's on the job is on us in the public sector to try and provide that information and create those connections, whether that be in providing transportation and providing, working with our community colleges to increase their skill set so that they
Yeah.
can take advantage of some of the jobs like driving trucks and that type of thing, so.
Yeah, it just may be as much as just getting the information out to some of
Yes.
these communities.
Certainly,
Isn't that
certainly.
right? So Mayor Morales is sitting here on a unemployment rate of a little over 2%, is that right?
About 2.9, 2.8.
2.8%, okay, so a little under 3%.
Mhm.
Do you have a sense of what San Antonio's unemployment rate is as we sit here?
Oh, off the top of my head, I can't think of what it is, but it's not quite as
It
low as
isn't that. In fact, San Antonio has for many years, just given the nature of the citizenry and the nature of what the economy has been in San Antonio, grappled, as many big cities have, with poverty, right?
Yes, we have a large percentage of our population here who are poor and don't have the skill sets to compete with many of the jobs in today's economy, and that's
Yeah.
been an issue we've dealt with for a long time here.
Right. From a workforce development standpoint, the mayor is talking about, Mr. Mayor Morales, Mayor Taylor is talking about not being able to get the word out to many of these communities that those jobs are available. As you indicate, that's not really a problem in Midland and in the surrounding communities. I mean, people are aware that there's work to be had.
In our
Yeah,
community,
yes,
most
your community,
definitely,
yeah,
yes. You know, the story that's being said is, we're trying to get this story out publicly nationwide is, yes, there's jobs, there's good money to be made in Midland, Texas, but the challenge is the roads are congested, there's no housing. If you come to Midland, do your research, make sure you have a place to live. Yes, you'll find work immediate, whether it's in retail or whether it's in the oil and gas industry, but our homeless issue has grown. Not dramatically, but it is growing. It's increasing because people just load up their vans and the families and bring them into Midland expecting to be able to find an apartment. Well, again, I'm going to share another story. A one-bedroom apartment starting in Midland is anywhere from $1,100 to $1,200 up to $2,000 for a three-bedroom apartment. So you can't afford that probably when you're loading that
Provided
van.
you could even find one.
If you can find one, that's exactly right.
Right.
We'll, by the first quarter next year, bring in 1,200 more units in addition to the 6,000 that we've already put online. It's
Right.
incredible. Last year we built close to 800 homes. This year we'll build another 800 homes, and it just continues. It's a construction war zone out in Midland, but it's orderly growth, and it's well planned, and everything is in control, but it's interesting though it's taking place before us.
Now, the new wealth, Mayor Taylor, Mayor Morales, that's been created in your communities, and I would say the same maybe to Mr. Tymrak, this is resulting in wealth going to people and to homes that have not really had it before, right? Are you seeing any kind of culture of philanthropy, which often happens when that kind of wealth is created, developing, or are your communities grappling with exactly what to do with this sudden windfall, Mayor, and then?
Let me answer real quickly on that one. Education is very important in Midland.
Yeah.
And we're having a challenge, of course, recruiting teachers and retaining teachers.
Right.
We have about 23,000 students in our ISD. To bring in qualified teachers and retain them is challenged because the oil and gas industry or any industry out there is recruiting them.
And presumably the budgets for public education dollars out there have not changed.
We went into the rich district, so it got even more challenging.
Got more challenging,
Yeah.
right? You were a taker and now you're a
Mhm.
maker.
So
right?
speaking to philanthropy, yes, there has been quite a few foundations that have formed. Nonprofits, I heard a number yesterday that we're close to 800 nonprofits in Midland.
Yeah.
With that being said, our United Way each year raises close to $3.5 million a year. We have a group of community leaders with the oil and gas industry who just this previous year put in $6 million to give teachers money, raises, find them homes. And so that is one example of how this community, our community, has come together to address the labor issue and,
Right.
and importantly, education.
Right.
So yes, the nonprofits, the foundations, very, very viable in Midland and very supportive of anything and everything we're doing out there to continue the growth.
Mayor Taylor, I look at the Forbes 400 and I see a whole bunch of people from Texas on that list, and they're the kind of people who are so new to the idea of wealth that Forbes doesn't even have photographs of them. They run those silhouettes like you have on Facebook when you haven't uploaded a picture, because they're so new to this, and they're a number from your area, from your community. Are those folks, from what you can tell, making decisions to put money back in to solve some of these problems?
I think some of our larger, more sophisticated nonprofits in our community are
Yeah.
certainly figuring out how to tap into some of those new wealthy folks. We have a number of large-scale projects that are underway. We're building a Children's Museum here and the Whitty Museum that I'm sure many of you have visited. They're undergoing a major expansion. So those organizations, yes, they've figured out how to identify those individuals to ask for support. But I think there's going to be kind of a learning curve for someone who suddenly comes into money to figure out, how do they want to be strategic about making investments, even if they are philanthropic investments. And so there's a lot of work for our community to do in order to talk with them about where are the places where they can make the most impact with their money.
Right, and Mr. Tymrak, I suspect in your community, which has not been a particularly wealthy community previously, the sudden arrival of this money is both a blessing, but it's also probably a conundrum in some ways.
Blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Prosperity and peril, and as you and I spoke
Yeah.
yesterday. Yeah, I'm that guy, the one that when I start talking about Eagle Ford, the first thing is, hallelujah, holy crap. Because these problems occur, talking about the philanthropy. First thing that people did when they got their money is put it in the bank
Right.
and go pay off their loans. Now talk to any banker down there and he's got this problem, his deposits are way up, his assets really are his loan portfolio, and he can't make any loans because these people have more money than he does.
Right. Nobody's in the loan-needing business at the moment. Right.
So when I said that earlier about we just trade one problem for another, there is a new problem. A banker who was just trying to keep his doors open to now, I got money just falling out of his pockets.
Yeah.
The philanthropy aspect is not occurring quite as fast because it is. This is a very, or slightly poor agrarian community that weathered this storm. When I first moved to Karnes City, I left San Antonio, not by choice, but I went to Karnes City.
Were you fleeing a warrant? What does that mean?
Well, I think former Mayor Cisneros thought it would be better if I lived somewhere else.
If you left, you just less said about that, the better.
Yeah,
That's fine.
But
Okay.
I get there and I wondered where the children were. There were no kids because you leave there to go off to school and you don't come back.
You don't come back, right.
There's no opportunity.
Right.
And by definition of the governor's office, we were declared a sudden and severe economic dislocation area, which means you've lost over 50% of your population.
Yeah.
It was substantial. So we go through this period of nothing's coming our way. We depended on uranium. I don't glow in the dark if you turn the light off, but
Right.
that was the big thing, uranium. And agriculture had gone away. There was a time that you could look from downtown and see 3 or 4 cotton gins. Now the nearest one is 75, 80 miles away. So agriculture went away. Everything that we knew went away, and hope someday something would happen. This shows up, putting money in everybody's pocket. Like in our case, one of the operators leased the complete city, which
Yeah.
means if you owned a lot, whether it be a quarter acre or a tenth of an acre, you're going to get a bonus check in July.
Yeah.
And then as it's happening now, you start to get the mineral interests. So there's money in everybody's pocket.
Right.
We had a young man who first thing he did was, like everybody, buy a vehicle, fix up the house, and then he realized that's all he really needed. And he came to us and said, "Can I do something for your city?" I said, "Sure." And he says, "I live out on this road just going out of town. Can I put up a welcome to Karnes City sign?" Out of his own pocket.
Yeah.
Lovely idea. Great. So we'd like people to step up and give back, but it's a struggle at first because of the education. They've never had that money before. And
Right.
now it's just you go to the mailbox and there
Yeah.
it is.
Dr. Tunstall, this is what you would call on Twitter hashtag first world problems, right? These are problems that people would be very happy to be wrestling with.
Sure.
In some ways, you'd take these problems if you knew that what was behind them was the kind of economic benefit that the boom is bringing.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about the sudden wealth. We've sort of postulated that the landowners are going to kind of go through 3 phases. One, what we call the deer in the headlights look, and that's been occurring now for a few years, just the surprise at all this unexpected wealth.
Yeah.
And then after that, we expect that they're going to start engaging in financial planning, estate planning, take care of their families. And then after
Right.
that's completed, then I think we'll start to really see a longer-term philanthropic
Right.
push by a lot of these.
Interestingly, you mention estate planning and financial planning. That's probably salad days in many of these communities, right? For those industries, people who are in that business would probably do well to relocate their businesses to those.
Well, and a lot of
Right.
them have already. They've set up a shop in South
In
Texas.
fact, it's created sort of secondary and tertiary booms, right, in certain industries, I suspect, that would be related to the arrival of this wealth.
Yep.
Dr. Tunstall, one of the things that I know from coming out to Midland about a year ago and talking to people out there that was on everyone's minds is, how long will this last?
Mm-hmm.
And should we not be a little cautious, given what happened the last time? When people thought this boom is going to go on forever and we're going to build up and we're going to do this and that and it's going to be great, and then suddenly the bottom drops out without really you're expecting it's going to happen. What is your spider sense as far as the longevity? How concerned, how cautious should these communities be about this?
Well, the folks in West Texas know this better than anybody. The oil and gas business is highly cyclical, and you never know what's necessarily around the corner.
Right.
So we constantly keep an eye on the price of oil, which had been hovering between $95 and $100 a barrel
Right.
for quite a while. Is down. Last time I looked yesterday was about $80 a barrel.
Yeah.
So, and that's starting to get close to the break-even point. But when you ask how long it's going to last, it's really two questions. One, particularly for South Texas, less so for West Texas, was, is how much oil and gas is really down there? And
Right.
the estimates I've seen for Eagle Ford range from 3 to 10 billion barrels
Right.
of oil, which
would give you a pretty good amount of time still to enjoy the benefits.
yeah, I
of
mean,
this
you're
boom.
talking about 9,000 wells have been completed to date. At least probably 25,000 will be completed, maybe as many as 40,000.
Right.
So you're talking about 10, 20 years of activity. So as to whether or not the oil and gas is actually in South Texas, that's been asked and answered. It's more a question of, what will the price of oil be? We saw
Right.
what happened to the price of natural gas production, or the price of natural gas when it went down to $2 per thousand cubic feet in 2012. Production slowed significantly as a result of that.
Yeah.
One other point I want to mention, we talk a lot about Eagle Ford, but I don't want to forget about West Texas. I've heard the comment that West Texas has lots of strata of shale, and they're really only a couple years into this. They're North Dakota's ahead of the Eagle Ford, and Eagle Ford's ahead of West Texas in terms of unconventional production. But I think it was Pioneer that said that they think there's about 12 Eagle Fords in West Texas. So
12 Eagle Fords in West Texas.
they'll be producing for a long time to come.
Right, so this will have a longer tail. Mayor Taylor, San Antonio is a Latino majority city. Karnes City and Midland have more Anglo population than San Antonio does. Population, obviously, of the state is changing, so we're concerned about and interested in the degree to which everybody is sharing in the benefits of the boom, and each demographic group relative to other groups are sharing in it. Are you seeing that the non-Anglo residents of San Antonio are equally benefiting from this, Mayor Taylor?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I guess I don't have any official numbers.
What is your sense of how this is spread out across the entire city?
My sense is that there are a fair number of minorities that are having access to jobs that pay a lot
Yeah.
higher wages than they would have been able to access in the past,
Yeah.
but they may not. So it creates a ladder of opportunity for them and their family.
That would not have existed.
That would not have existed previously, so
Right.
that's definitely positive.
Right.
But they are not experiencing maybe the same level of economic impact that maybe some folks that are making investments in companies.
Right,
and
more at the bottom,
owning-
at the
right,
bottom of the
Right, exactly.
of the line.
But what I'd like to see us figure out, though, is how we can use the opportunity that's created even by folks that are having jobs that are at the lower end of the spectrum with
Right.
higher wages. How can we use that to then help the next generation that's going to come after that?
Yeah.
For example, we had Kelly Air Force Base here
Right.
in San Antonio for many years, and I often hear people talk about that being largely responsible for the creation of the Latino middle class here in San Antonio, because of the stability that was provided by those good jobs that then allowed folks to be able to buy homes, send their kids to college, and then the next generation could do better.
Right.
So how can we position the activity that's going on right now to act in the same way as that?
Have a long tail in the same
To
way that
have
the
a
Air Force
long-term
Base did.
effect, yes.
Yeah. Mayor Morales, let me ask you a version of that same question. How are you ensuring that the benefits of the boom, it does seem like it's permeating every area of Midland. I mean, I read that you all have the highest income,
Highest median income, I think it hit 82,000.
but of any city in the whole?
That's state of Texas for sure,
Yeah,
and
but
of course
but it's
nationwide, yeah.
near the very top,
That's
if
right.
not at the top nationwide,
That's
right?
right.
For numbers like that to happen, it's got to be permeating every corner of the community.
Yeah, it is challenging. I mean, you're still very concerned about the workforce, and I'll use the city employee workforce. We have
Right.
about 800 employees, and we're challenged today, the city council, of that median income, or that income of, you know, we're at 50 percentile is what we're saying in paying comparable to other cities our size. We need probably be up to the 75 percentile because we're losing to the other industries again. They deserve it. To live in Midland is probably 35% higher than any other place in the nation. The cost of goods is 35%.
So for all that additional income, there's also additional expense.
There is.
One of
It
the
is challenges.
unintended consequences of this, right? Yeah.
And so it's important to us that we realize that there is a challenge that not everybody's in the oil and gas industry. That's probably the biggest topic that you hear out there, is not everyone is in oil and gas. So you've got to keep us in mind. And why can't council do something about the high
Because,
rents?
and let me say, Mayor, because presumably those other industries have not seen a spike in income. So for instance, you're not paying people at the restaurant as much as they might be making in the oil and gas business.
Most definitely.
And yet they're still having to pay the same higher prices
definitely.
for living in
We're
Midland.
all on the same playing field.
So why
That's
don't you
right.
raise their wages?
I have had to, and just personally
speak
in my
into
industry.
the camera, go ahead.
But
Yeah.
again, but you know, the overtime is up, and you know, again, as I stated, you cannot keep restaurants fully staffed.
Right.
Services down, which is not good for our community, because we want to be very hospitable. We want to be business friendly. We want to make sure that as you're visiting our community, whether you're staying in our hotels, they're clean, the restaurants are good service, streets
Yeah.
are clean, and so on and so forth. So we are diversifying.
Yeah.
It's exciting to be able to say that we have brought in a new industry, the aerospace.
Right.
You know, it creates new jobs and opportunities. You kind of talked a little bit about what happens if the oil and gas kind of settles down. And so you've got to continue thinking about the future, 20,
Right.
30, 40 years from now.
The thing that I heard on that question of thinking about the future, when I came in the last time, I was told by the editor of your paper, the Midland Reporter Telegram, Stuart Doreen, well, you know, this is the first time I heard this phrase. This is probably 12 or 18 months ago. There are all these man camps in Midland in this surrounding community. I said, what's a man camp? And they said, well, man camps are these tenant cities where oil field workers are living because we haven't built any new apartments, or at that point had not built any new apartments in 25 years. Largely out of, you know, in deference to the concern that if we overbuild again, we're going to see the bottom drop out and everybody's going to lose their shirts. So in fact, the housing problems that you're talking about are at least in part born of that caution and that apprehension, people
Well-
who saw what happened the last time.
And true, there is a lot of man camps out in the county, trailer camps. But what's also has to be kept in mind, this goes out 125, 200 miles.
Right.
You know, you've got Lamesa, Big Spring, Andrew, Stanton, they're all booming, they're all doing well.
Yeah, you get an hour outside of Midland
Yeah.
driving from Austin, you just see it all right there.
And
It
they're all
shows up.
rebuilding their communities. They're
Yeah.
all feeling this great surge of the oil and gas industry
Right.
in their communities. So we're all working together out in the Permian Basin to address road traffic and congestion, fatalities, the housing, the low unemployment. It's a regional issue, not just Midland
Right.
and not just Odessa, but regional.
So the mayor, Dr. Tunstall, was talking about infrastructure, broadly defined, and we're going to have conversations specifically dedicated to sort of soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure later in the day. Mr. Tymrak and I had a conversation last night about housing, about the fact that you create housing and then that creates a need for more schools because people move to town, they move to town with kids, those kids get enrolled, and you get more people here and you get more kids and more schools. Same thing with hospitals. It kind of metastasizes, right? Once you get a couple, then you got to build more and more and more. The infrastructure question is a big byproduct of this boom in the economy.
Yeah, and it's obviously necessary
Yeah.
with all the activity, but there's also a potential silver lining to that. I mean, one of the interesting things about particularly South Texas is the fact that, you know, 5 years ago we had been working with these communities the same way we are now, but 5
Yeah.
years ago we were working with them on population losses, as Don alluded to, the fact that people were leaving, the populations were actually
Right.
shrinking. Well, we're still working with them, but now on a completely different set of problems and issues. But hopefully, with the creation of this new infrastructure, and if the communities pay attention to the aesthetics, quality of life, that ultimately they'll create the foundation for a diversified industrial or economic base, so that
A post-boom economy.
so that if things do slow down, they'll have other things to fall,
Right.
as a backup, if you will. And it's interesting to note, I mean, South Texas, for example, is a tremendously good climate for growing olive trees and producing olive oil.
Right.
And the U.S. imports 95% of the olive oil it consumes, so it's clearly an untapped market for domestic producers. There are opportunities for tourism, recreation, a variety of things. In West Texas, a little bit more challenging. Things are more remote. It's a
Right.
more arid climate, but overall, that's sort of the guidance that we work with communities on, is trying to be thinking about that diversification.
Right. Mr. Tymrak, who is thinking about and who is ultimately paying for these infrastructure investments that you've had to make in Karnes City as a consequence of this success?
Well, not to throw a rock at the state government, but
Oh,
it certainly
do.
isn't.
Oh, do. It's not the state government.
No, it falls on the shoulders of the community.
Yeah.
The elephant in this room is housing. I know you're going to talk about infrastructure later, both the traditional water, sewer, streets, and the non-traditional health care, meaning the medical, the social, the
Right.
spiritual, everything that is woven into the fabric of a community. But housing is that double-edged sword, too. Everything that comes from housing is going to cost you in some other venue. And the example that we talked about last night is the one that I use all the time is in the education area. The schools need more teachers and more coaches, but they don't have a place to live and they're not going to commute, so you got to build the housing. So you build the houses and you get more families and you get those coaches and you get those teachers, but now you need more coaches and more teachers.
Yeah.
And now you got more kids. Now the next thing is you need more facilities. The peril, like in our case, that was prosperity on the surface, but the peril comes, we have 4 independent school districts in Karnes County. All 4 have issued bonds for new schools, just to the tune of ours, $45 million.
All as a result of needs themselves born of this growth.
Yes.
Yeah, and activity.
And that's why I would say we just sort of trade one problem for another. Is we didn't need a larger school, but now we're going to have a bond payment. But again, we also look to the prosperity that's coming in, and it's sort of a vicious cycle. It
Yeah.
really is. We take that step, but it comes at a cost.
And you're in a situation, presumably like Mayor Morales, where your community was not on the wrong end of the school finance construct in the state of Texas, but may be soon on the wrong end, right?
We flipped in 1 year from
Flipped in 1 year,
in handout to wallet out.
wallet out, right? Mayor Taylor, your city presumably has infrastructure needs that predated all this activity, right? Given the fast growth of San Antonio, hospitals, roads, and all that. Are you seeing definite infrastructure needs as you confront all this that are related specifically to the Eagleford?
I can't say that I see as many infrastructure needs directly related to Eagleford
As
as
they may.
some of these smaller communities, because
Right.
we're obviously a much larger city, and so the impact has been kind of diluted just by the size of our city. But infrastructure has been an issue that we have grappled with for a long time here, as far as the quality of infrastructure and what we invest in infrastructure. So it's an ongoing issue for us.
Do you share what I would describe charitably as Mr. Tymrak's dim view of the state as far as the state's willingness to put in for these for some of these costs?
Well, I think the area that I've probably focused more on in relation to the state is probably more on human infrastructure and the need for more investment in education
Right.
and other things that can support people in being able to support themselves.
So in fact, it's related to, but not necessarily directly related to the impact of the boom stuff.
Yes.
Even if I can get myself out of that hole a little
You
bit,
can't,
because
you can't, but go ahead,
my
that's fine.
state senator is on the panel later this evening, and
Yes.
I just would not want to hear from that.
But I would say your state senator might agree with you. that
Well,
the
and I
state
think
should
she
do
will,
more.
because, and let me just attack one of the most obvious ones, and that's the road aspect.
Yeah,
We were speaking in Galveston at the Civil Engineering Convention
yeah,
and talking about roads, and their society has a 2013 study that evaluated the roads throughout the country, and 32% or over 32% of the roads in the country are classed as
poor to mediocre. Now, that's 32%. Can you imagine what it might be in the shale play? And I'm going to use Eagle Ford as an example.
Right.
Can you imagine what it might be? Well, we had a study commissioned, the Council of Governments commissioned a study, and it was targeted at Karnes County and Karnes City in particular. And they used a 5-scale category from very poor to good. And Karnes City came in at over 80%. Very poor. Holy crap. I didn't realize it. No, I kind of knew it, but I just...
But there's the proof, right?
There's the proof. And then I look back at the, if you're a rig watcher, let's say, I mean, we're leading the state every month, #1 in rig count. That really doesn't mean anything. Go over to the production for this month alone, or for August, the most recent results. We were 5.2 million barrels of oil. Since August of 2010, in 4 years, we've produced 162 million barrels of oil.
Yep.
Now, if you use the $100 as your metric figure, that's a lot of billions of dollars that this one place is putting into these coffers, that severance tax. And yet, not even a nickel is coming back. I corresponded for a while with Williston, North Dakota, because that was kind of like our sister city size-wise
Yep.
and everything. They have 0.6 unemployment, but they don't have mineral rights in the hands of the individuals. But the government, the state, sees fit to give them, I think, 5%, maybe they're up to 10% now of that severance money. And like I said, we haven't seen a nickel
Little bit
until
of a
now.
different deal.
Yeah,
Let me
there's-
quickly let Dr. Tunstall and Mr. Morales, Mayor Morales, and then we're going to open it up for the time we have balanced time for questions. We'll ask that you line up at the microphones and join in and ask questions of our panelists.
Yeah, it's just interesting to note that there is no systematic mechanism in Texas for the severance taxes to be, that go up to the rainy day fund, to be reallocated back to the
Right.
South and West Texas communities that are being impacted with regard to things like roads, whereas North Dakota does have a mechanism. And it's a real challenge for these rural communities to take that case to the legislature because the populations are so sparse. I had the mayor of Abilene at a conference recently in West Texas said that there are more state legislators in Harris County, where Houston is, than there are in
Right.
all of West Texas. So that's one of the reasons we
Right.
have sort of been working with the communities in South and West Texas to kind of band together to create a unified voice
Well,
to take.
the dirty little secret, if you watch the legislature for very long, is that the real fights aren't Republican and Democrat, they're rural and urban. And that may never be more the case than with some of the stuff we're talking about actually in the next session. Mayor Morales, last word to you. Do you believe that there are dollars that ought to be coming back in to shore up some of these infrastructure needs created by your good fortune?
Most definitely. And let me just say, there's a shimmer of light with, I guess, the recent bill, HB 6, with the water bill. You know, it gives hope for those communities who really need help and assistance with water. Secondly, with this Prop 1, of course, we hopefully are all voting to pass it. The way the system is set up today is a failure, in particular communities like ours who, you know, we understand what the oil and gas is doing and what it's doing for the state of Texas. We're not getting our fair share of the road tax back. It's disappointing that we have to continually fight to bring dollars back. The formulas are just messed up, period. And so, although Midland is doing well, we're still very strapped. We're spending every dollar we can to build roads, to keep up with infrastructure. 2 years ago, we put in a pipeline, $200 million. It was the largest municipal project that Midland did to bring in water for the next 50 years. But we had to do that. We are, just as you heard, we're very remote. We have to take ourselves. We cannot rely on the state or the federal government to do anything for us. So it's very disappointing. It's very disappointing that the Permian Basin, what it produces for this state of Texas, that we cannot get our
The
fair share
economic
back.
benefit is,
The
which
economic
everyone is
benefit.
enjoying, is not finding some relief from the state. All right, let's go to questions. We have microphones here on both sides. Surely we have some questions for our panelists. Come on down, we'll be patient. Of course, it's somebody in the absolute back row, in the corner of the back row. Harry, that's okay, don't trip. Thank you for your question, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess my question is primarily for...
Probably not.
Sorry. I'm Kelsey Monk. I work for EDF in Austin. My question is primarily for Dr. Tunstall. You talked about the numbers of the economic benefit, and it's wonderful, and you know, it's not to demand the cake and to eat it too, but have you also looked at the lost, or the lost revenue from the flared natural gas And I'm also curious if your estimate includes the growing methane mitigation industry.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
If your estimate included the growing methane mitigation industry.
At this point, we have, I'm going to turn so I can, my microphone. That second aspect, no. We, in fact, the economic loss, if you will, from flaring, it's not something we've specifically studied. What I can tell you, though, is that in Texas, we actually flare relatively little gas compared to other locales, 3% on average. I think that's in the Eagle Ford. Actually, as the state as a whole, it's even lower than that. Whereas in North Dakota, unfortunately, they're flaring off maybe as much as 30% of the natural gas there. So they're still trying to get a handle on that issue. But as we're able to identify costs, whether it be in terms of air quality or if we could quantify the road issue, for example, we would include those in the study. The problem is it's really hard to put a number to those issues without an awful lot of research expenditure. And that's where we're somewhat hampered.
Other questions for our panelists? If you prefer not to get up to the microphone, you can just raise your hand, and as the mayor said, use your outside voice, if you prefer. So we have some state legislators here, panelists, and I know that they're going to be taking messages back up to Austin with them when they gavel in January. Let me ask the three local leadership representatives here, San Antonio, Midland, and Karnes City, if you could deliver one message to them as it relates to state policy on the economy, the economic benefit question, and what you all would like out of this, what would it be? Mayor Taylor?
Well, I guess it would be that they would really think outside of the box, and instead of just focusing on enjoying the benefits of enhanced state coffers, but also to really think about what are some of the policies that could assist the municipalities that are dealing with the impacts of growth. I would like to see us, as an urban planner who started out focused on affordable housing, I'm really interested in hearing some of the challenges of the smaller cities in relation to housing, and I think we could definitely use some more assistance, guidance, and tools in relation to housing, so that would be one that I would suggest.
Mr. Tymrak, you carry one message back to Austin state leaders, what would you have them do?
It's the same message we've been carrying there for years, and in this case, it's magnified. There's a golden goose in the Eagle Ford shale and it's laying golden eggs, and the state's not doing anything about it. Now, my particular representatives and my senator are working very hard. They've recognized it for some time, but as a whole, it's that rainy day fund is where it's at because of this. And I know we're going to tap into it. But again, you can't expect this golden goose to keep laying these eggs when we have roads, as I've told you, are just atrocious, that our expenses, I need now another elevated storage tank. I need more ground storage for water. I need more lift stations. I mean, we need more of everything, but we can't even just get around.
So you feel we're on the risk of being victims of our own success here?
We really are. I'm saying it's prosperity and peril, and we're all addressing the prosperity, how to spread the money around, and that, but not addressing what our peril is, which is one problem for another.
Now, Mayor, you alluded to the transportation is a big concern of yours. Anything else you would want your folks to take back?
That is probably one of the major issues, but you just said it. We're victims of our own success, and it's very disappointing that our legislators are doing everything they can, and we're doing everything as community leaders to fight for what we feel like is our right back. But it's just like policy. They've got to sit down and really get down to the ground level, understand what these communities are doing, get into those remote areas, identify the issues, listen, and address them.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to end here so we can move on with the rest of our day. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists, Mayor Morales, Mayor Taylor, Dr. Tunstall, and Mr. Tymrak. It was a great conversation. Thank you. We're going to take a short break, reset the next panel, and we'll be back in a second. Thanks so much.